A Black Man Sketch podcast is brought to you by Public Good Projects with support from the CDC Foundation. To learn more, visit ujamaaplace.org. That's UJAMAA place.org.
Hey, welcome back everybody to another episode of A Black Man Sketch. I'm your host and current Ujamaa Man of the Year, Bryant Brown. We're at season 3, episode 1. Up next, we have a very special guest and the newest addition to our Ujamaa staff, Brother Rashad Hameed, our new wellness coach. Brother Rashad is a native of Harlem, New York, and a recovering addict in long-term sobriety. He has served the Twin Cities and surrounding areas for more than 30 years through his work as a licensed alcohol and drug counselor and manager in a culturally based treatment organization. Rashad is a native of Harlem, New York, and a recovering addict in long-term sobriety. He has served the Twin Cities and surrounding areas for more than 30 years through his work as a licensed alcohol and drug counselor and manager in a culturally based treatment organization, and as a supervisor in adult and juvenile probation in Dakota and Ramsey counties, respectively. Rashad holds a BA and a master's degree in organizational management and communications from Concordia University. Through the lens of his work, Rashad brings a culturally specific perspective and a clarity of vision, empowering clients to reach needed milestones for their personal growth and development. Rashad is passionate about social justice and repairing the harm that institutional and systemic racism has created in community he serves. Please join me in welcoming our newest wellness coach to our Ujamaa staff, Brother Rashad Hameed. Welcome, Brother Rashad. How's it going today?
Hey, it's doing great. Glad you extended an invitation to me for today's show.
Absolutely.
My name is Rashad Hameed, and I'm a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. For the state of Minnesota. I've been licensed since 1998. Prior to coming to Ujamaa Place, I worked at an outpatient treatment program for about 3 years, providing counseling services and assessments and so on for people who were struggling with addiction, substance abuse problems. Prior to that, for 20 years, I supervised probation officers in Ramsey County for 10 years, and prior to that, for 10 years at Dakota County. So, and before then, I was also an addiction counselor for an organization called African American Family Services, which no longer exists. And as a recovering addict myself, I'm originally from New York, and I was a heroin addict for about 16 years, and fortunately got it together. So I feel like I got a unique perspective on the issue.
And I do have a question for you. Our first question is, how important is it to bring awareness of the societal harms that drugs are doing in the Black community, and especially with the misconception that opioid addiction affects more whites than Blacks and Native Americans?
Okay. I think it's extremely important that we continue to address the addiction issues, particularly in the Black and brown communities. Unfortunately, when the issue was just relegated primarily to the Black and brown communities, we didn't get a lot of, resources and attention and everything that's involved in prevention and research and treatment as it is today. It wasn't until the white middle class individuals that became impacted by particularly opiate, fentanyl, that we've had this huge hue and cry of treatment and services and dollars being poured into this effort.
Right.
But for a long time, particularly in the community that I grew up in and other Black and brown communities, we've always had an issue with drug addiction. And it's unfortunate that it took this long for it to be recognized, by the government, funders, so on and so forth.
And the community as well. I mean, I feel like as a people, we got to find a way to lift that stigma, make these conversations okay to have amongst our people and amongst ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of really caring in the community. I mean, I feel like I see that with other cultures. When somebody has to go to treatment or go through something, they have the support of their family. They have a couple people coming to visit them. And I've been through treatment myself, didn't necessarily have people coming to visit me, people to make sure that they waited by the phone for the couple calls I had. And and that's because of, that stigma that we have as a people over.
Well, that's true. That's a great point. But also part of the challenge is, particularly for people like us in our community, to get access to treatment. And Minnesota is one of the rare places where access to treatment is not as difficult as it is in other states. Is that when you look at the current array of treatment programs in Minnesota, and you look at their staffing complement, and you see who's the leadership in those treatment programs, you don't see people that look like us. You know?
Right.
So, I want to come to a treatment facility where I feel welcome, where I feel like they understand my culture, where I see people like me that I feel like I can relate to. And that is so critically important. But it doesn't really exist in the Twin Cities to a degree like it did maybe some time ago. Yeah, you have Turning Point, and you may have one or two other small mom and pop organizations. But you look at the New Ways, you look at the Betty Ford's, you look at other large treatment facilities, you look at their staffing complement, you look at their leadership, we're missing.
What do you think are some of the things we could do to combat that and turn that around as far as the numbers of our people that you see in leadership roles?
Yeah, I think that certainly recruitment for the field, for licensed alcohol and drug counselors, as a start. We have national organizations that one would hope that they would be making a concerted effort into recruiting individuals in the field. Also, you may have to look at how it's licensed. When licensure came about in Minnesota, it created a barrier for some individuals who was already in the field to become licensed for any number of reasons. The education level, experience, so on and so forth. And I'm not saying that we can't compete educationally with the dominant culture, with the white culture. I'm just saying that access to these trainings, to the field itself, needs to be reexamined. And again, we need to challenge the large organizations that are providing treatment services to our community to challenge them to hire people that look like us,
Absolutely.
And, really, to really address that issue, not only in a community level, but also in the political area too. So, it's sad when I worked in a treatment program, and I was the only one. I was the only, African American, male in this facility, and it was a local facility. When I worked at other programs, more often than not, I was the only one. The only time that I worked in an organization that had people that looked like me, not only as staff, but in leadership, was when I worked at an organization, African American Family Services. And it's a tragedy that we lose these type of institutions, in our community, that we have to figure out a way, how can we make these institutions more sustainable in our community? Because they do great service.
How can we help them grow, And I think overall increasing numbers like you said, in leadership roles would automatically increase the societal harm reduction, because you automatically would have more places in the community that, like you said, people can relate to,
Yeah.
people.
But let's talk about harm reduction. When you hear the word harm reduction, what does it mean to you?
What it means to me is finding a safe way. People can do things until they can get a better handle on them. It doesn't necessarily, for me, harm reduction doesn't mean the problem completely goes away. It doesn't mean sobriety. It means putting all the safeguards in place so that things can be done in a safe manner to avoid, all areas of possible threat or fatality.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it's like...
Yeah, that's a great answer. Harm reduction is a way of making sure that if you are going to use drugs, if you're going to use heroin or whatever your drug of choice is, that hopefully that you can do it in a way where you're not using dirty needles.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing it in a way that's somewhat safe for you. It's not necessarily co-signing an individual's addiction, saying, yeah, just go ahead on and do what you're going to do. But we want them to do it in a safe way and hopefully get to a point where they realize that, I need treatment or I need some more help. But we don't want people ODing. We don't want people getting caught up in the whole fentanyl trap where they don't know what type of drug they're getting. They don't know what it's cut with. People are dying needlessly. And, but this is a hard sell, particularly in our community, which is a very spiritual community. A lot of people frown upon harm reduction. They feel like you telling a person is okay to use.
Well, no, because now that I think further into that while you're speaking, it is also making sure that there are overdose prevention kits available to people, so that people aren't dying in the street. It's making sure people do things in the safest way so that they can be less of a threat to themselves and other people.
Absolutely. We want to get them to a place when, hopefully, when they're ready to go to treatment, they're still alive and they're ready to take that next step.
The hard thing about it is some people don't understand till they go through it, till it hits them,
Right.
It's just like taking your friend's keys because he's too drunk is harm reduction.
Absolutely.
They tell us to do that. They tell us to do that in commercials on the television, but they're just not seeing it in their head that way,
Right.
You didn't stop your buddy from taking those drinks. You just took his keys, when you should have not had drinks with him in the first place. The harm reduction party, you made sure he didn't get in his car, that he had somewhere to lay his head that night, some food to eat, and that he got up safely the next day.
Right. Or if I want to hang out with my friends and they're going drinking, one of us is going to be designated to be sober, so that I can drive my partners home and I'm sober and I don't have to be subjected to a DWI or killing somebody,
But people that argue against harm reduction should just say you shouldn't go out with your friends at all.
Well, if I'm going to go out with my friends, I'm going to be sober, because if they're going to drink, I don't want them driving and drinking. So I'm going to take that on. I'm not going to drink. I'm going to have a Coke. We're going to sit down and, chop it up, have a good time. And then when it's time to go home, I'm the designated driver because I'm sober, and I'm going to get everybody home safe.
Yeah, and I feel like, it's just about adjusting that lens that people look at it through, because it's really hard to argue with once you, put it to people in a way where it makes complete and total sense. What would you say to a current or newcoming Ujamaa man who's listening and struggling with addiction?
Well, I would say, first of all, you're at the right place. Let's talk about what you want to do. I'm not going to preach at that individual and tell them, hey, you shouldn't do this. I want them to be at a place where they feel that, first of all, that they're going to be heard, that they're in a safe place, a nurturing place, where I can talk to a Rashad or any other coach and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm doing, and present options to them. Let's do a screening. Let me get you to an assessment. If you want to have an assessment, if you want to go into a program, I'll help navigate all of that. But at the end of the day, and if you've been through treatment, I've been through treatment, it's a matter of how much you want this. How much do you want this?
Absolutely.
And I tend to look at it as like, this is life and death. When I worked at a treatment program a couple of years ago, I lost 8 people in 3 years from OZN. So I take this very serious. And so it's nothing to be played with. So I try to address it like that. If they're going to talk, if they're going to open up, if they're going to be honest, come on, let's take the next step. And I'll guide them through the whole process all the way.
That's exactly what we want to hear, And you can also, I want to throw out there, get them in touch. We have alumni now, people that have been through it as well, other peers that they can reach out and support them in any way, shape, or form they need it as well.
You got peer recovery specialist.
Absolutely. And what we were talking about earlier, I wanted to say, when you were saying we needed more people in these leadership roles, I recently became a CPRS, a Certified Peer Recovery Specialist myself, and I feel like that is an avenue which a lot of young brothers can get into the field and begin to help a lot of people out here. And
Absolutely. And that's like the first step. And then you might want to say, down the road, well, maybe I want to, be a licensed alcohol or drug counselor. Let me take it to the next step. But you're providing a valuable service because, your peers, they'll hear you before sometimes they hear me. They'll see me and they'll, what Rashad knows, back in the day stuff, I'm not hearing that. But they can hear the message from you in a way that they may not hear it from me. So you're providing a really important service to our community.
Oh, yeah, and it's important that people with that experience, you want to learn how to fly from a pilot, you want to learn how to cook from a chef. You want to learn people that been there, done that. You know what I mean? My next question for you, brother.
Next question, bro.
We talked about societal harm reduction.
Right.
And how do you feel you can impact societal harm reduction through your upcoming work at Ujamaa Place?
By providing information. I look at my role as, providing information, providing options, and providing the tools so that, hey, if I want to go to treatment, I know where to go. If I want to practice harm reduction, these are the things that I need to be aware of. I need to know what Narcan is. I need to be able to have access to fentanyl strips. If you're going to use, I want it to be an informed decision. I want you to be going into it eyes wide open.
And even
I really don't want you to go there, but if you do, I want you to know what you're doing.
And
I want you to inform decision because this is your life.
And just remember, as well, we're also touching in other ways, even beyond just the addiction piece, the access to transportation. Ujamaa, we're working with broken families, poor financial literacy, helping people access education, criminal justice system connection.
Right.
So you actually have very many different avenues to where you can, introduce harm reduction to society as a whole in many different ways.
Right. Well, part of harm reduction, like you said, is in order for a person to manage their addiction or, get right, they kind of, they need a roof over their head. They need to get out the streets. Mm-hmm. They need to be able to take care of themselves health-wise, physically, mentally. It's a whole holistic approach. And, addiction is just, somebody that's using. It's just been my experience. That's just like the tip of the iceberg. They've been wrestling with issues of life that they haven't been able to deal with successfully. And most people use because, I just want to numb out. I just don't want to be dealing with this, or I don't know how to deal with it in a more constructive way. The trauma that most of us have experienced growing up in this society as people of color, contributes to that too. Just being, a black man in America, a black person, women too, the micro transgressions that we experience each and every day. You hear about this brother in Memphis, Tennessee, who, got beat up by the police, died. It's just every day, we are experiencing some form of trauma, and we need to be able to manage that without killing ourselves by using drugs, and that's the game plan. How do I manage life in a way that I don't create harm to myself or to others? How do I do that?
Absolutely.
And hopefully Ujamaa Place can be a vehicle in helping young men, get to that place. I just feel that this is an important vehicle, this podcast. When I worked at African American Family Services, we didn't have podcasts back then, but we had a radio show on KMOJ called The Urban Agenda. And we used to have people come on and talk about, health and wellness issues. So I think this is great that Ujamaa Place has this podcast where we can talk about issues that are important to us as a community, as people, and hopefully, be solution focused so that we can really be aware of the options we have in living a life that is fulfilling, that is compassionate, and that puts us in a place where we can do what I call each one teach one. I'm standing on the shoulders of others before me. I didn't get here by myself. All of us, we need each other to continue to grow, to thrive, all of that. We need to have a solid community of individuals in order to make it, because we can't do it by ourselves. And Ujamaa Place is a vehicle, one of the vehicles for that. So I appreciate being on the show. And anytime, you want to talk about anything that I feel like I may be able to contribute, be it, substance abuse, the correctional system, probation, and any of that, I'm more than willing to lend a voice to those issues.
Brother Hameed, we'd like to thank you so much for joining us today on our podcast, and we'd like to welcome you with open arms to the Ujamaa family. Thank you for stopping by, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Take care now.
All right.
A Black Man Sketch podcast is brought to you by Public Good Projects with support from the CDC Foundation. To learn more, visit UjamaaPlace.org. That's UJAMAA place.org.